Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, students. Students, today we are going to discuss uh, the major characters and critical summary of the book Travelogue. But before discussing major characters and summary of the Travelogue, I will discuss its backdrop. So, in order to discuss these things, I will share my screen with you so that you may also be in a position to read out the things that I am going to read out. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First, I will discuss the backdrop of the book. Then, uh, major characters of the some of the major characters of the travelogue will be discussed, and our last topic of today's lecture would be the summary of the book. Gulliver's Travels, a misanthropic satire of humanity, was written in 1726 by Jonathan Swift. Like many other authors, Swift uses the journey as the backdrop for his satire. As we know and was discussed yesterday, that journeys was very much in trend in those times. People used to go to remote lands as it was an age of discovery and exploration and expansion. People, those who used to go on journeys or embark different journeys, when they used to come back, they it was very much in fashion to write about their journeys. While writing those journeys, they used to exaggerate their experiences of the exotic lands. They were in habit of showing things in hyperbolic manner, exotic creatures they came across the foreign lands, वो बातों को बढ़ा चढ़ा के पेश करते थे फिर वो. So Swift also took this journey as the backdrop for his satire. He invents a second author named Captain Lemuel Gulliver, who narrates and speaks directly to the reader from his own experience. The original title of Swift's novel was Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World. In parts by Lemuel Gulliver, first a surgeon, then a captain of several ships. This was the full and the original title of the travelogue Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's name probably is an allusion to King Lemuel of Proverbs 31, who was a weak minded prophet. Swift may also be connecting his character to a common mule, a half-ass, half-horse animal that is known for being stubborn and stupid. This is the etymology of the word Gulliver. You may connect or relate his name to any of these. May be related to King Lemuel or Proverbs. This is the first part of Gulliver's name, Lemuel, that may be connected to or have uh, get an allusion to the name of King Lemuel of Proverbs 31, who was a weak-minded prophet. The other part of his name, that is Gulliver name may be connected to a mule खच्चर जिसे कहते हैं उर्दू में, a half ass half horse animal, and this animal is known for his being stubborn and stupid. हट धर्म सा होता है ये. Gull is a person who is easily fooled or gullible. On the other hand, this word gull means buddhu, naive, a person who can easily be fooled or gullible. At the same time, Gulliver represents the everyman with his average intelligence and good humor. The reader is able to identify with him and join him in his travels. So, by while we are reading this travelogue, we when we get connected to or get ourselves synchronized with the character Gulliver, we are able to be a virtual part of these journeys. Gulliver went there physically. We go there or we accompany him virtually while identifying ourselves with this character. So, as far as the etymology of his name is concerned, we find two parts of his name, Lamuel and Gulliver. Lamuel and Gulliver both have one thing common, that is the mental capability. In both the parts, we have a weak mindedness. शरीफ एक शरीफ तो नहीं, मतलब वो एक भोला सा मासूम सा आदमी है, इतना मक्कार नहीं है। जो गल एक भोला सा नाइव सीधा साधा सा सिंपल बीइंग के तौर पर आता है। और नाम जो है वो उसका करेक्टर का, वो उसके अंदर की पर्सनैलिटी को ज़ाहिर करता है, वो कैसा आदमी होगा। Even though Swift constantly alludes to events that were happening while he was alive, the story rings true today. In that time, it may be that these events seemed unnatural or unreal, but today it seems true. It sounds true today, bringing light to our own societal issues and to patterns of human nature. We do find these kind of people today in amongst us, and we don't get wondered that how can be this man of this nature, of this behavior or demeanor, because we do find these people amongst us. So it is no wonder that Swift represented some of the real and hidden natures of human being that were not represented yet in print in that time. Throughout Gulliver's voyages, Swift goes to great lengths to scrutinize, parody, and satire various aspects of human and often English society. Since Swift's immediate society was English, or if we talk about his character, his mouthpiece, Gulliver's society, he too was an English. Therefore, he actually criticizes his own society, keeping in comparison with other societies or cultures he comes across during his voyages. He does this in two ways. First, by comparing humanity's ways with those of cultures decidedly beneath it. First, Gulliver shows or Swift shows two lower cultures. In first two voyages, he shows two cultures which are beneath the English culture of the time, such as the Yahoos and Lilliputians. They are debased kind of people. Second, by comparing humanity with cultures that are far superior in intellect and political ideas, such as Hanoms. So we have two kind of cultures. One is higher, the other is lower, and both are compared with humanity and English and the English culture of the time. In both the ways, he actually is criticizing his own nation and people. And we, the reader, may also compare our cultures with the cultures of the people and nations that Gulliver comes across during his voyages and may find fault and appreciate our culture or our people. Gulliver embarks on four distinct journeys in this travelogue, each of which begins with a shipwreck and ends with either a daring escape or a congenial decision that it is time for Gulliver to leave. Every time he begins to embark on a journey, Gulliver has to have his ship wrecked, his ship gets wrecked, and he goes there. He finds himself lying in some other exotic land or some foreign lands or amongst some unfamiliar people. And there he spends quite a time. And after that, spending that time amongst those people, he had to escape that land or comes to realize that it is a proper time for Gulliver to leave now or leave that country or land. This is what happens in every journey of Gulliver in this book. The societies Gulliver comes into contact with help him, as well as the reader, to examine his own culture more closely. When Gulliver's Travels were published in 1726, this examination of English culture was not appreciated. They were ruling the world, these English people, and they were not in habit or they were not accustomed to be criticized and finding fault with their culture. And when somebody did so or criticized their culture or their ways of living and ridiculed them, this thing was not tolerated or appreciated. The book was highly controversial because of the light in which it presented humanity and more specifically the English. The chief aim of Swift to write this book was not to criticize humanity in particular, but actually he wanted to criticize or reform his own society, that is English. But he became so bitter and so sarcastic in his satire that it seems so bitter and pungent today that people were not able to digest this sort of treatment of their humor. When the book was first published, Swift's identity was hidden because of the book's volatile nature. He published it under a pseudonym of Gulliver. The people who saw that the book made it into print, also cut out a great deal of the most politically controversial sections about which Swift became extremely frustrated when he came to know that certain parts of his book were cut out or were censored. He became disturbed in a letter under the pseudonym of Gulliver. Swift shows his annoyance with the edits made to his novel without his consent. He writes, I hope you will be ready to own publicly, whenever you shall be called to it, that by your great and frequent urgency you prevailed on me to publish a very loose and incorrect account, my travels. But I do not remember I gave you power to consent that anything should be omitted, as much less that anything should be inserted. The version of the book read today is complete. The book's version that today we are reading is complete one, whereas at that time uh, it was censored to a great length and it was almost made a children's book. The parts which criticize the policies of the government and policies and criticize the human tendencies were cut out from the published manuscript. Therefore, it remained just a children's book. Now we have the complete version of the book. Late in life, Swift seemed to many observers to become even more caustic and bitter than he had been. 3 years before his death, he was declared unable to care for himself, and guardians were appointed. Based on these facts and on a comparison between Swift's fate and that of his character Gulliver, some people have concluded that he gradually became insane and that his insanity was a natural outgrowth of his indignation and outrage against humankind. So it was concluded that since he was not mentally stable, therefore the sarcastic and misanthropic attitude of Gulliver was a direct result of his insanity. However, the truth seems to be that Swift was suddenly incapacitated by a paralytic stroke late in life, and that prior to his this incident, his mental capacities were unimpaired. So it is not right to conclude uh, his misanthropic attitude in that way. Part of what was appeal to people of all ages. The book has been read by countless children and has been made into more than one children's movie. We have so many children's movie based on Gulliver's travels. First, as we have just discussed that some of the major portions of the book were censored by the publishers of the time due to the government policies, and it just became or remained as a children's book. It was taken as a children's book, but when those parts were included, it became more than a children's book and comes up with a great style of the time. At the same time, it had been widely critiqued and studied by literary scholars and critics, politicians, and philosophers. In addition, much like the works of Shakespeare, the comedy of this travelogue has something for people of all intellectual levels, from toilet humor to highbrow satires of political processes and of ideas. So, this was the backdrop of the travelogue, Gulliver's Travels. Now, I will discuss some of the major characters of the book. First is uh, our major character, that is Lemuel Gulliver. Lemuel Gulliver is a married English surgeon, traveler, and adventurer. Gulliver is the protagonist of the travels. He is the central character of this book. Gulliver wants nothing to do with domestic life and leaves England repeatedly to have adventures in far off lands. He is very neglected negli he is very much indifferent to his domestic life, and he leaves his wife and children and England to have adventures in far off lands. He is resourceful, open minded, adamant, जिद्दी सा आदमी भी है about his own truthfulness, यानी जो वो खुद देखता है समझता है वो उसी को सच समझता है, मानने लगता है और उसको अपनी सच्चाई का बड़ा यकीन है, अड़ जाता है बात पे. And a remarkably fast learner of new languages. ये नई लैंग्वेजेस को बहुत जल्दी सीख लेता है. He is an observer of other beings and other cultures. Though Gulliver is glad to return to England after his first three adventures in Lilliput, Brobdingnag, and Laputa, his time among the Hieronyms permanently darkens Gulliver's perspective on humankind. ये तीन जगहों से तो वापस आ गया था, बड़ा खुश हुआ था आके, लेकिन अपनी आखिरी वॉयज में हाय अनिम्स जो थे उधर उधर से आके उसकी पूरी एक पर्सपेक्टिव जो है वो चेंज हो जाती है इंसानियत के बारे में. एंड ही एंड्स द नॉवल डिस्गस्टेड बाय द सोसाइटी अराउंड हिम एंड लॉन्गिंग फॉर द कंपनी ऑफ हाय अनिम्स. Our second character is Mary Burton. Mary Burton is Gulliver's neglected wife. Left at home for years while he travels and then spurned and detested as a filthy Yahoo upon his return from the Hyanims. तो वो उसको छोड़ के चला जाता है कभी किसी जगह कभी किसी जगह पे. Lilliputians. Lilliputians are the inhabitants of Lilliput. Lilliput के रहने वाले लोगों को लिलीपुशियंस कहते हैं, जैसे चाइना या चीन के रहने वालों को चीनी कहते हैं, पाकिस्तानी कहते हैं पाकिस्तानियों को. पाकिस्तान के रहने वाले लिलीपुशियंस आर द इनहेबिटेंट्स ऑफ लिलीपुट. दे आर about 5 to 6 inches tall people. It's a unique creature of a very tiny size, 6 to 5 to 6 inches. They are all sworn enemies of the Belfascodians of a neighboring island. They are having an extended war with their neighbors Belfascodians. Lilliputians and Belfascodians are two nations which are symbolic of England and France. तो बेल्फास्कोडियंस जो हैं वो आप इसको फ्रांस के तौर पे लेंगे, लिलीपुशियंस को आप इंग्लैंड वालों के तौर पे लेंगे. तो ये दोनों जैसे वहां पे लड़ाइयाँ हो रही थी, इधर भी इन दोनों मुल्कों के दरमियान लड़ाइयाँ ही रहती हैं मजहबी बुनियादों पे या पॉलिटिकल जो भी, या आप इनको इंडिया और पाकिस्तान भी समझ सकते हैं. इंडिया और पाकिस्तान से बेहतर ये दोनों ईरान और सऊदी अरब लगते हैं क्योंकि इनका मजहबी मसला ज्यादा था. द एम्परर of the Lilliput, the leader of the Lilliputians, emperor. He initially is friendly towards Gulliver but changes his mind about him when Gulliver refuses to continue fighting Belfasco and puts out a fire in the emperor's chamber by urinating on it. तो ये चूंकि वहां पे लंबा आदमी था उनके दरमियान में 6 इंच के लोगों में, तो उन्होंने इसको अपने दुश्मनों के खिलाफ जंगों में इस्तेमाल करना शुरू कर दिया. किंग को बड़ी खुशी थी कि हमारे पास बहुत बड़ा एटम बॉम्ब हाथ लग गया, जिसको मर्जी इसके जरिए जाइंट के जरिए मरवा सकते हैं, वो इसका कुछ बिगाड़ नहीं सकते थे. लेकिन व्हेन ही रिफ्यूजेस हिम टू फाइट बेल्फास्कोडियंस, एम्परर गेट्स अनॉयड, वो उससे नाराज हो जाता है. और एक और इवेंट भी होता है जहाँ पे आग लग जाती है एम्परस के महल में, तो वो आग को वो बुझाता है उसके ऊपर यूरिनेट करके. तो ये चीज से वो बड़ा अनॉयड हुए और स्विफ्ट यूजेस द एम्परर as an example of rulers who must always have some type of sport before making a decision. Belfascodians, the neighbors to the Lilliputians with whom they have been engaged in extended battles, वो उनके साथ जो एक्सटेंडेड बैटल्स हैं उसमें वो ये सारे लोग जो मसरूफ हैं ये उसको जाहिर करते हैं, इनके साथ वाला जो मुल्क है. Gulliver steals their ships and prompts them to make peace with Lilliput. Gulliver flees to their island when the Lilliputians convict him of treason. Next we have a character, Filmnap. Filmnap जो है लॉर्ड हाई ट्रेजरर ऑफ लिलीपुट है, यानी वहां का खजांची, who dislikes and suspects Gulliver of having an affair with his wife. ये सारे लोग एक दूसरे से जेलस भी हैं, मोहल्लाती साजिशें भी करते हैं, कंस्पिरेटर्स हैं, कंस्पिरेसीज हो रही हैं वहां पे. सो दिस मैन accuses Gulliver of having an affair with his wife. You can imagine the debased nature of these people that he is accusing Gulliver, who is of 6 feet tall, 6 feet, and having an affair with his wife, who must be of 5 inches. So you can imagine their debased nature and the height of hypocrisy and conspiracy. Slamkson and Tremaxton, ये दो Lilliputian political parties हैं. The first presents the low heels, the second represents the high heels. ये लो हील्स एंड हाई हील्स इनके स्लोगन्स हैं, इनके कह लें कि इंतखाबी निशान हैं. एंड दीज पीपल आर, अगर आपने हमने कल पढ़ा था वो जो दो पार्टीज थी, टोरीज और विग्स, ये उनको रिप्रेजेंट करती हैं सिंबॉलिकली. ब्रॉब डिंगनेगियंस, ये ब्रॉब डिंगनेगियंस जो हैं द इनहेबिटेंट्स ऑफ ब्रॉब डिगनैग है. ब्रॉब डिगनैग एक वो इलाका जहाँ पे जो गलीवर दूसरी वॉयज पे गया था. दे आर जाइंट्स, टेंस ऑफ फीट टॉल, ये बहुत लंबे हैं, 10-10 फुट लंबे ये लोग हैं. वहां पे चला जाता है. पहले जब गया था लिलीपुट में तो वहां पे ये खुद लंबा था. जब यहाँ पे आया है तो वहां के लोग लंबे और ये छोटा है उनके अंदर में. एक 10 फीट लंबे हैं ना. दे आर एज बिग कंपेयर्ड टू ह्यूमंस एज ह्यूमंस आर टू लिलीपुशियंस. ये उतने ही लंबे हैं जितना गलीवर जो था वो लिलीपुशियंस में लंबा था उनसे. किंग ऑफ ब्रॉब डिंगनैग जो है, दो ही एट फर्स्ट कांट बिलीव दैट गलीवर इजंट जस्ट अ पीस ऑफ क्लॉकवर्क. पहले तो उसको यकीन ही ना आया ना गलीवर को देख के कि ये सचमुच का इंसान है. उसने समझा कि किसी ने ऐसे ही बनाया हुआ है कोई चीज. The Brobdingnagian king comes around to Gulliver and happily spends dozens of hours discussing politics and comparing their two cultures. वो इससे बड़ा खुश होता है, उसको अपने पास रख लेता है और इसके साथ बातें करता है. उसको हैरानी होती है कि छोटा सा है और बातें भी करता है इतनी ज्यादा. तो वो उसके साथ घंटों डिस्कस करता है पॉलिटिक्स को और अपने दोनों कल्चर्स को. वो बताता है गलीवर के मैं जिस इलाके में आया हूँ यहाँ से वहाँ के लोग कैसे हैं, क्या कुछ है. तो वो वहां से के कल्चर को और पॉलिटिक्स को अपने मुल्क की कल्चर और पॉलिटिक्स के साथ कंपेयर करता है. और लेकिन इन डिस्कशन से ही कम्स अवे फ्रॉम दीज डिस्कशंस रादर डिस्कस्टेड बाय ह्यूमंस टू. लेकिन उसको गलीवर की बातें सुन के इंसानों से नफरत हो जाती है. क्वीन ऑफ ब्रॉबडिग्नैग finds Gulliver very entertaining. Because of her huge size, Gulliver is disgusted when she eats. लेकिन गुलीवर को अच्छी नहीं लगती, वो उसको बहुत बुरी लगती है जब वो खाती है. उसका इतना बड़ा साइज और जो खाना वाना खा रही है उसको अजीब सी लगती है. वहां पे एक ड्वार्फ है, बोना पिग्मी, क्वींस ड्वार्फ, गलीवर्स प्राइमरी टॉर्मेंटर इन ब्रॉबडिग्नैग. सबसे ज्यादा तकलीफ इस ड्वार्फ को थी गलीवर के वहां आ जाने पे, और उसको लगातार तंग करता रहता है. द गलीवर्स ड्वार्फ इज क्रूअल एंड डेवियस. बड़ा जालिम और मक्कार किस्म का बौना है ये. ऑलवेज लुकिंग फॉर अ वे टू ह्यूमिलिएट गलीवर, और मुख्तलिफ किस्म के तरीके ढूंढता रहता है गलीवर को शर्मिंदा करने के. द फार्मर, फार्मर इज ग्लूम दार्कलिच's father and Gulliver's first caretaker in Brobdingnag. जब गलीवर जो था वो इस जगह पे पहुंचा था तो वो एक जगह पे गिरा था. तो वहां पे एक किसान था जो इसको उठा के घर ले आया. तो ये उसका फर्स्ट केयर टेकर है. उसकी बेटी है ग्लूमदाल ग्लिच, और वो उसको दे देता है. ही मेक्स मनी टूरिंग गलीवर थ्रू द कंट्री एज अ फ्रीक शो. उसके हाथ गलीवर के लगा, उसके हाथ एक तरीका आ गया पैसे कमाने का, और वो ये था कि वो पूरे मुल्क में गलीवर को लिए फिरता, दिखाता फिरता कि ये देखो एक अजूबा मेरे हाथ आ गया है। तो वो उसको एक अजूबे के तौर पर, कि छोटा सा इंसान अजीब सा जो बातें भी करता है और मुख्तलिफ किस्म के करतब भी करके दिखाता है, उसको दिखाता फिरता था लोगों को। द फार्मर इवेंचुअली सेल्स गलीवर टू द क्वीन। बाद में उसने गलीवर को क्वीन को बेच दिया था। ग्लूम दाल क्लिच। ग्लूम दाल क्लिच जो है वो डॉटर ऑफ गलीवर्स मास्टर इन ब्रॉबडिग्नैग, दैट फार्मर उसकी बेटी है। हर नेम मीन्स लिटिल नर्स इन ब्रॉबडिग्नैगियन लैंग्वेज। This is what Gulliver calls the farmer's daughter who cares for him during his stay in Brobdingnag। तो उसको केयर वगैरह करती है। नेक्स्ट आ जाते हैं ये लिलीपुशियंस। तो हमारा हो गया था ऊपर, दोबारा मेरे ख्याल यहाँ पे आ गया है। तो किंग सॉरी, ये लेपुशियंस हैं। लेपुशियंस जो हैं वो कौन से हैं? लेपुटा के, लेपुटन्स भी इनको कहते हैं। Inhabitants of the floating island, the Laputa floating island, the Laputians are totally consumed by complex mathematic, astronomical, and musical theory, and so disdain common sense that they lack all practical knowledge and can barely function as bodies in the world। तो ये जो लोग हैं लेपुशियंस, ये एक लेपुटा जो है वो एक उड़ता हुआ जजीरा है जहां पर ये गलीवर पहुंच जाता है। और ये मुकम्मल तौर पर हर वक्त किसमें डूबे हुए हैं? मैथमेटिक्स, एस्ट्रोनॉमिकल और म्यूजिकल थ्योरीज के अंदर। इनको कॉमन सेंस से नफरत है, इन सब लोगों को प्रैक्टिकल नॉलेज से ये खाली है। जो वहां का किंग है, ही इज प्री ऑक्युपाइड विद मैथमेटिक्स एंड म्यूजिक, हर वक्त मैथमेटिक्स और म्यूजिक की बातें। अकेडमी ऑफ प्रोजेक्टर्स भी वहां पे विजिट करता है, यहाँ पे प्रोफेसर हैं। बालनी बार्बियन रिफॉर्मर्स हु प्लान रिफॉर्म विदाउट कंसिडरिंग इफेक्ट्स, वो चीजों को रिफॉर्म कर रहे हैं, उनके इफेक्ट्स जो हैं उनको कंसिडर किए बगैर। मनोडी द गवर्नर ऑफ लगाडो ऑन बालनी बारबी, एक इलाका है वहां का गवर्नर है लगाडो का। ही represents the traditionalists who are opposed to the reformers। वो ट्रेडिशनलिस्ट हैं, रवायत पसंद लोग हैं और जिद्दत पसंद लोगों के खिलाफ हैं। He shows Gulliver around and teaches him about why the island is so barren। The Struldbrugs लुग्नेगियन भी इनको कहते हैं, इमोर्टल्स हैं वहां के। ये ऐसे लोग हैं जो कभी नहीं मरेंगे, हमेशा जिंदा रहेंगे। They were identifiable at their births by a red ring on their forehead। जब ये लोग पैदा होते तो उनके फोरहेड पे एक एक रेड रिंग होता था। While they never die, they do age। मरते नहीं है लेकिन ये बूढ़े होते जा रहे हैं। They are social outcasts due to their jealousy, pettiness and generally obnoxious character। इनको निकाला हुआ है उन लोगों ने अपने इलाके से, इनकी जेलसी, कमीनगी और गंदे कैरेक्टर की वजह से। हाई एनिम्स, हाई एनिम्स जो हैं वो एक रेशनल, पीसफुल, जेनरस एंड सिविलाइज्ड हॉर्सेस हैं। हाई एनिम्स आर आइडियल बीइंग्स, at least from Gulliver's perspective। They are so honest and virtuous that they don't even have words for things like evil and falsehood। उनके यहाँ मकारी, कमीनगी, झूठ वगैरह के लफ्ज भी नहीं, उनके पास इतने अच्छे हैं। They live content in their egalitarian and placid society, troubled only by the question of how to constrain the yahoos that live among them। Gulliver lives among them for several years and afterwards he is extremely reluctant to return to England। वहां जाके इसका फिर वापस इंग्लैंड आने को दिल नहीं किया करता था। याहूस, याहूस क्या है? ये फिल्दी, ग्रीडी, ग्लटनस, सेल्फिश और एंड डम हैं, किस्म की क्रिएचर हैं। The Yahoos are the embodiment of everything gross and crude and human nature। इंसानी नेचर में कोई भी गंदी, प्लीद और इंतहाई बेसिक जो कोई बेसिस हो सकती है, उसकी embodiment है ये. दे आर physically they look like monkeys. Properly speaking, they are degenerate humans. ये इंसान की बदतरीन शक्ल दिखाई गई हैं. Who live among the hyenas, उनके दरमियान रहते हैं वहीं पे घोड़ों के साथ. Yet by book's end, Gulliver is referring to every other human being as a Yahoo. जब कहानी खत्म होती है इसमें आखिरी वॉयज और गुलीवर वापस आ जाता है इंग्लैंड में, तो हर इंसान उसको याहू लगने लगता है, क्योंकि हर इंसान ही उसके नजदीक इतना ही कमीना और घटिया है. द ग्रे हॉर्स और द मास्टर हॉर्स भी इसको कहते हैं. द Gulliver's master in the country of Hyanims, who first takes Gulliver in, teaches him Hyanim ways, who discusses human society with him. Gulliver holds the master horse in the highest esteem and kisses his hoof upon parting from him. तो उसको चूमता भी आते हुए ना वहां से. डॉन पेड्रो. Don Pedro, a kind and gentle Portuguese sea captain who finds Gulliver on an island after he leaves the Hyanims and takes him against his will back to into human society. ये इसको आखिरी वॉइस से वापस जो लेके आता है बंदा, उसका नाम है. So students, this is our today's lecture. Tomorrow we will continue from here on, and then here on we will go for the summary of the book, and thereafter we will discuss some of its major themes and its detailed. We'll start studying its detailed summary with critical comments. Thank you very much.